There are over 1,000 named diet protocols currently documented in the scientific literature. One of them tells you to eat based on your blood type, and one tells you to drink apple cider vinegar every morning. And at least a dozen will tell you that carbohydrates, the macronutrient your brain literally runs on, are actively trying to kill you.
And here's what trips us up. Every single one of those has a sell. Someone made money writing a book, launching an app, or packaging a supplement. The confusion is not a bug, it's the business model.
Welcome back to the Overthinking Podcast, the show for women navigating fitness and health in a world that makes everything way more complicated than it needs to be. We're your hosts. I'm Bri.
And I'm Kelsie.
And if you're here, chances are you're tired of overthinking every fitness trend that demands us shrink and has us feeling like we're failing at a system that never wanted to see us win.
Today, we're doing something we've been wanting to do for a while. We ranked the most popular and the most ridiculous diet rules and food protocols from absolute pseudoscience nonsense all the way up to, okay, this one might actually be not that crazy, and here's the nuance.
Burn book, burn book, burn book. We're going to break down what each one gets right, where it might have a legitimate place, and what they almost all miss. Which, spoiler, is a lot. And another spoiler, I've personally given most of them the good old college try. So more on that later.
I can't wait. There is a through line here, though, that we're going to land at by the end. But first, we need to go through the list because some of these are truly unhinged and we need to talk about it.
And honestly, the one that we are starting off with hits so close to home.
I can't believe when you told me this.
We are starting with the most pseudoscience of all pseudosciences in terms of diets. The blood type diet. If my sister is listening to this, she is literally cackling. For anyone who doesn't know, this is a protocol from 1996. It was a book that claimed that your ABO blood type determines which foods you should eat, like which are the best for your body and which you should not eat. This was my mom's nutrition Bible growing up, you guys. Literally, this was her, This was literally her single source of truth about nutrition, like next to People magazine, like on the end caps of the grocery store. My mom got our blood types and specifically would make sure that we were only eating these foods. And so she wasn't like that. Let me rewind. She wasn't like that neurotic about it, but it was like the book was always out, and there's like a recipe book in the kitchen, like the little stand.
Right.
It was just on the stand at all times. And so it was just like a weird thing. But yeah, type O's are like supposed to eat mostly meat. Type A's are supposed to be like more plant heavy. And then type B is somewhere like in the middle, like arbitrarily. And type AB is basically just like, good luck.
First off, I don't even know my blood type. Second off, was there even like an explanation of like, okay, type O, that's like the universal donor, right? Like,
Right.
Why do they not get to eat vegetables too? Like, make it make sense. This is just so beyond. Like, it's one of those things where it makes sense if you don't think about it. You're like, yeah.
You're like
But
epigenetics and food. Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, you say big words at me and I'll believe you. Sure.
Yeah. Exactly.
But we want to be clear, like just like your mom had this book, like this book sold millions of copies based on a theory that had no, and I mean zero peer-reviewed clinical backing. And if you do a little search on, I did this right before we hopped on, if you do a search on PubMed for the AB diet and you look for a systematic review, there was this one study, I think it was like 2014, that said, like the headline was, blood type diet may be beneficial for like cardio metabolic outcomes. But when you actually read it, the results say it was independent of the diet type. So what had happened was mic drop. What had happened was they started incorporating more vegetables or more protein. So then they started seeing better metabolic outcomes, like lipid profile, BMI, waist circumference. Those were the measures that improved. But as we're going to see in this episode, those measures will improve if you do any of the good things from any one of these diets.
So if you were like me and you grew up doing the blood type diet and did feel better, you probably felt better because you just cleaned up your diet, right? You probably just paid a little bit more attention to what you were eating. You're being more mindful, not because you actually matched your food to your blood type. There's literally a systematic review out of the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition that says that it didn't change anything. So the science is there. But Kels, what makes this feel so seductive still for us?
I think with any diet, like a lot of these patterns, and especially blood type diet, it feels very personalized. It's almost like this, like, aha, like when you go to the doctor, right? It's so much guesswork where they're like, we don't know, we have to do all this testing. And then when you finally get an answer or somewhat some semblance of an answer, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I finally found the answer. So it's that feeling when you finally feel like a diet that's made for you. You have all the answers. If you don't think about it, it makes sense. And that's something that people desperately want, especially women who have been in the limbo of diet industry and fitness culture. Is like we're constantly told to eat less and to shrink our bodies. And then eating less also doesn't help. So you also need to eat more, but more of the right things. So we're not really sure what to do. So it's this like personalization where it feels like, okay, this has got to be legitimate.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm glad you also just generalized it for all diets because as we go through these next couple lists, most of these, especially like some as we get to like the middle end, are going to be like, okay, like you understand why there's such a big education and nuance gap to these things. So, moving on, apple cider vinegar. Oh my freaking God. The shot heard around the wellness internet, the apple cider vinegar shot.
Have you ever done the apple cider vinegar?
Absolutely. I literally shredded my gut lining for like 3 months doing
I'm
this.
surprised it made it to your gut lining before your esophagus.
No, I literally did the apple cider vinegar every single morning. And then later on in the day, I would do lemon and apple cider vinegar with water and cayenne pepper. For
Ew.
I know. They just say
Ew.
it boosts your metabolism, you know. No, it
Beauty
doesn't.
is
It just
pain or
burns it
something.
burns your gut lining. It you
Yeah.
one cell wall in there and you're just burning it up.
Beauty is pain or something. But, apple cider vinegar did have some research behind it. We're going to use
Okay.
that loosely, which kind of immediately puts it slightly, very slightly above the blood type diet. Like, for example, there's some studies showing modest blood sugar blunting when taken before or with a meal. That acetic acid appears to slow gastric emptying, which softens the glucose spike, and that is real. But that blunting effect can also be achieved in a mixed meal, meaning you have a carb and a protein and a fat in the same meal.
I see. The claims that actually go viral are not the modest blood sugar blunting claims, right? They're the it boosts your metabolism, it burns your belly fat, it detoxes your liver, and rebalances your gut flora. None of this has actual meaningful or clinical support. The research that does exist is mostly small and short term, and a chunk of it is on actually rodents, not even human beings.
Great, perfect.
I did the research
And
for us.
And like we just talked about, there are downsides. So taken undiluted, right? Even in just a little bit of water, which is what most people do because the content that they watch didn't mention the part about it being dangerous. It can damage tooth enamel, irritate your esophagus, which also, by the way, dry scooping your pre-workout can do the same thing, Bri. There are case reports of esophageal injury for apple cider vinegar and even pre-workout, dry scooping your pre-workout. So, and if you have low potassium or you're on certain medications, it can also have contraindications.
My favorite 0-calorie salad dressing, though, does have apple cider vinegar, and that's
Yeah.
about the only place you'll find us using it, right? You cook a lot with apple cider vinegar in your
Yeah,
dressings?
for sure.
Yeah.
You
So
know what I love using apple cider vinegar for? It's kind of as a dressing, but I love like a warm kale salad where you just like
Mm.
gently heat your kale in a saute pan. and you pour a little bit of olive oil or not, yeah, a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of apple cider vinegar, and like a drizzle of honey. You mix it all
Ooh.
up until your kale just gets like perfectly like warm. Like you don't want to cook it because then it's going to get wilty, but just like warm.
Mm.
It's the best. You add some apples, some candy pecans. Living.
Summer salad, here we come. That will detox your liver.
Yeah. Yep.
But hey, that brings us to our next claim. This is the third one on our list. So, what do we got next?
This one is just going to be broadly any detox, juice cleanse, reset. Ugh, this one genuinely bothers me from a physiology standpoint. So, gonna try to stay calm.
Yeah.
Do you have any experience? Set the scene for our listeners on what we're even talking about.
I do. I have done some of these. Okay.
Mhm.
But your liver is processing roughly 1.4 liters of blood per minute. So, right now, while we're recording this, it runs this two phase enzymatic detoxification around the clock. So, converting fat soluble toxins into water soluble compounds so your kidneys can excrete them. Then your kidneys filter about 200 liters of blood per day. Your body has an extremely sophisticated and multi organ detoxification process. The system works that does not take 3 days off and wait for you to buy a $14 cold pressed juice from Erewhon to kick back on. Okay. If that thing is running on 24/7.
Yeah. The word toxin in the wellness industry literally does so much heavy lifting. Like, it means everything and nothing all at the same time. Like, there are genuine harmful things in our air, in our water, but just saying toxins broadly is just inflammatory language.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Toxic is intentionally vague because if they named a specific compound or a specific mechanism about how it's detoxing, they'd have to actually prove it. And the vagueness is illegal, but also a marketing strategy. It's not a scientific.
And the thing about most juice cleanses or detoxes is that they're very low in protein. I actually knew a girl from a gym that I went to a long time ago. She was on a strawberry diet, just strawberries for like weeks because hashtag fasting or detox or something.
Oh my gosh, she's still around? Is she still alive?
Girl, I don't know. She's trapped in the diet culture somewhere.
And to
But the
be
thing is that
Mhm.
when you're doing this for 3, 5 days, or in her case, like weeks, you're accelerating muscle breakdown. You're probably not getting good workouts. Your performance suffers. Your body will pull from lean tissue because, like we talked about in our last episode, it's metabolically active and expensive to maintain. So it's going to be the first thing that your body attacks.
Yeah. And I will say that I have done a handful of these like cleanses or detoxes, but they haven't been for the reason that my liver needed a detox or that my kidneys needed a detox, but it was actually more for my gut. And so when I was competing in CrossFit and my gut was processing all this lactic acid and um, just not feeling great, after a big season, I would let my gut kind of rest for a couple days. And that's just more from a fight or flight mode is like letting your digestive system actually just have a moment. So the actual juice cleanse itself, it wasn't detoxifying my liver. It wasn't doing anything like that, but it was allowing my digestive system to rest a bit. But other than that, if you're not a high level performance athlete, everything else that comes with a juice cleanse is kind of a total loss.
But even as an athlete, it was probably not like eating strawberries for 2 weeks. You were probably like, oh, I was maybe eating like an asshole for a little bit. Let me cut out all the things that I was eating, focus on like big salads, lean proteins, all of the stuff that all of these diets that we're going to talk about are the good features, right? But then, get a little carried away. So, whether you felt better or not from a cleanse, that's fine. We believe you. We're not going to take that away from you. But the mechanism is almost certainly that you stopped eating all the ultra processed food, alcohol, whatever it was for a few days. That's the variable, not the celery juice. I would even argue that just eating the celery would be better as a detox because then you're getting the fiber.
Yeah. And you do not need a $300 kit to do that. The other thing I want to name is just the framing around these cleanses and detoxes and resets. These words simply imply that your body is dirty and that it needs fixing. And for some women who have been told that their bodies are their problems to be solved, since they were like 12.
AKA
That
you.
framing, aka me, aka a lot of women, and that framing is not neutral. It feeds something, but not in a good way. And I will say that a lot of times when women go on these cleanses or detox or whatever, this is something we talked about in our big training episode, is that we feel like when we lock into something, we have to feel the pain of something to know that it's effective. And some
Right.
of the most painful things are not eating because you're working against your body's rhythms and natural rhythms. So if you're hungry, you're supposed to eat. And just like
Right.
I think some of these things perpetuate a negative relationship to your body and your body's signaling too.
Yep.
So,
Yep. You get out of touch with what you actually need.
yeah.
So moving on to the next one, because we're going to keep riding this bus, is again, broadly, carbs make you fat or you should avoid them altogether. Possibly the most expensive lie in the fitness industry. And I know, Bri, you will die on this hill.
I will die on that exact hill, yes.
It is expensive for your sanity and for your gains.
So let's actually define what we mean when we say this, because there are two versions of this claim kind of floating around. One is refined, ultra processed carbs consumed in excess contribute to fat gain and metabolic dysfunction, which is basically true, right? We basically know this. But keyword is excess, consumed in excess. And the other is carbohydrates as a macronutrient just causes fat storage, just should be minimized, which, like, that's not the case, right? So let's go back to the first one. When
It's
we
one
can,
of those things that makes sense if you don't think about it.
right, literally, it makes sense that when you eat in excess, you might store body fat, right? Whether it's carbs, proteins, fats, it doesn't matter if you're overeating or eating in excess relative to your energy output, you are going to have higher chance of storing that as body fat. Probably going to store it as body fat.
Yep.
Say it like it
The
is.
The amount of women that I've worked with that are so afraid of eating rice or bread, God forbid, like every single one that I've worked with, they're constantly like, "Well, I know you said pasta's okay, but I had pasta last night," and they still feel guilty. I'm like, "Did you have it with the protein?" "Yes." "Great. That's a perfect meal. I'm so proud of you."
There's so many versions of this woman I want to, like, literally hug. Be like, "It is okay that you had a few more grapes." And, like, the whole fruit being about, like, I just can't even. So, let's just talk about what happens physiologically, have a little education moment, because I feel like our listeners should know exactly what happens when we eat carbohydrates. When you eat carbohydrates, your body converts them to glucose, and glucose is the preferred fuel source for your brain, your red blood cells, and your working muscles during any kind of moderate to high intensity effort. And insulin facilitates the uptick of that glucose. So the claim that insulin itself is the villain, that eating carbs spikes insulin causes fat storage, all of that is just a massive, well, lie and an oversimplification of a system that also has glucagon, leptin, ghrelin, and 15 plus other hormones all talking to each other constantly. So we can't just minimize it to just that.
Right. This reminds me of probably like 2010-ish, where there was like the whole glycemic index rage and phase, and everybody was talking about, oh, you need to eat low glycemic index foods and only eat high glycemic foods after workouts. The thing about that is, in a mixed meal, like I just said, when you have a carbohydrate, no matter what glycemic index plus a protein, that is off the table. You don't even have to worry about it anymore because your body responds to everything that it's given all at once. So if you're having a potato, a white potato that is higher glycemic index than a sweet potato, but then you're also adding butter to it, you've completely negated the glycemic index formula. So in isolation, our food and our eating patterns don't exist in a vacuum. And also, when you control for calorie intake, low carb diets do not produce superior fat loss compared to higher carb diets. If you look at any lean bodybuilding athlete or CrossFit athlete or anyone that has the physique that you want, and you ask them what their carb intake is, on average, it's going to be about 200 grams, I would say.
Way over. I mean,
Yeah.
depending on the size of the
Saying on
athlete, but yeah.
average, like, that
Yeah.
accounts for the low end, that accounts for the people who are taking women who are upwards of 350 grams per day, like,
Oh, yeah.
the women who have the physique that you want are eating so many carbs.
Yes, and they're not considering peanut butter as a protein source. And if you are exhausted and you have brain fog and you are feeling flat in your training, you probably need to be eating more carbs, my girl. And don't be afraid of them. Don't be afraid of them. So let's talk
Yeah.
about the next one, talking about fear. Let's talk about carnivore. Speaking of fear, brought to you by the bros who told you carbs are bad, the carnivore diet, or mostly meat. Some people allow eggs and dairy. The hardcore version is literally just beef and water.
That's so
That's it.
gross.
Ew.
Just beef and water. I imagine them putting it into their blenders and, like, just eating steak and water and drinking it.
Do you watch Love is Blind?
No.
There was a man who literally put a chicken breast in a blender with water and drank it with protein powder.
Ew!
I can't. I think it was Love is Blind. If it's something else, call me out in the comments. But
Yeah, please.
that is horrendous.
Better yet, send us the clip.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Honestly, I can only imagine how sludgy these guys, and I say guys because I'm like, no sane girl is fucking doing carnivore diet. Okay. It's definitely some fucking podcast bros that are like, they look 20 years older. They've been out in the sun. They're just like leather handbags. That's the type of dude that I imagine is eating carnivore because no fucking sane person is doing this. I just imagine that their body feels so shitty. Like you get back from a trip, right? And you're like, I just need a vegetable because all you want is that like nutrients.
I will say that it does make things really simple. And so I have had clients in the past where, carnivore or carnivore adjacent just really worked for them because it was simple and it was like pretty easy for them to follow. With that, yeah, they kind of felt not great at times. And like you said, just like bowel movement timing was off or really inconsistent. The Steelman argument is this: the elimination of ultra processed food, refined carbohydrates, and common allergens like gluten, dairy, FODMAPs removes a lot of variables and drives the inflammation and GI dysfunction in a lot of people. And some people with autoimmune conditions, IBS, or significant food sensitivities do report dramatic symptom relief. And that's real. And the question is whether it's the meat that's helping or the removal of other things.
Yeah. It seems like you could arrive at some of these outcomes without the extremes. And what concerns me from an evidence standpoint is that there is zero long term randomized control trials on a carnivore diet in terms of health outcomes. So all we have is anecdote and very short data. We do know that from decades of nutritional research that fiber is not optional for long term health overall. If you want a positive health trajectory, you must eat things with fiber, which is vegetables, carbohydrates like bread, pasta, grains. Your microbiome diversity collapses without all of those nutrients. So, like phytonutrients, you can probably assume by the name, is plant nutrients. These compounds have antioxidants, anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer properties. You're not getting any of those if you're just eating a slab of steak.
So I got to ask, what does this look like for women specifically who have complex hormones, bone density concerns, and all the stuff that we care about on this show?
Yeah, I mean, bone density is a real concern. For example, calcium from dairy is not included in this, right? If you're on a strict carnivore diet, magnesium, potassium, vitamin C, all of those are basically absent from meat only diets. So, vitamin C deficiency causes scurvy. And if you don't know
Oh,
what this is, you're going to learn something real crazy. When I was in my master's program, we actually learned about it. And I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, I'm very glad to be in a developed nation. There are actually documented cases of carnivore dieters presenting with scurvy symptoms. And the last time that people died of scurvy was pre-Columbus transatlantic voyage. So, whenever that happened. Don't ask me. I'm not a fucking history nerd. This was
what?
due to a lack of vitamin C, which presented as symptoms of lethargy so intense that it was a debilitating disease that ultimately determined the success of nations.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You will not. I already have IBS. I can't have scurvy as well.
Sorry, I'm too busy. I can't.
I'm too busy. My GI doesn't know what to do.
So eat an orange just to not have scurvy, okay?
Yeah. Well, at least eat something else. If someone's on a carnivore diet or even like a modified keto, I would still want you to keep an eye on your fiber of anything else. That would be like the most, like, sure, like the person who marketed protein is probably just rolling in dough, but whoever marketed protein should be marketing fiber. Okay, moving on, intermittent fasting. And we're moving into the tier of diets that are a little more complicated to talk about because they do require some nuance. And this one to start with is intermittent fasting. And this one I have more complicated feelings about than others. But Kelsie,
Same. Same. So, intermittent fasting, otherwise known as IF, is technically not a diet, it's an eating pattern, mostly in like time constraints. So, the most common version is going to be a 16-8, where you eat within an 8-hour window and fast for 16. There are also other extended protocols, for example, 24-hour fasts, alternate day fasting, but 16-8 is what most people mean when they talk about this. So, do you know of any evidence where maybe this could be applicable or where some of that information gets a little muddy?
yes, and I definitely dabbled in the intermittent fasting zone, especially when I was
Sure.
like doing keto, which we'll get to. But there is legitimate research on metabolic flexibility and insulin sensitivity and your body's cellular cleanup processes called autophagy. So these benefits are real and they are documented, but the problem is when you dig into the studies, a significant chunk of the weight loss and the real metabolic effects disappear when you control for calorie intake, which suggests that intermittent fasting works largely because it helps people eat less, not just because of anything unique or magical about the fasting window itself.
Yes. Which again is fine if, like you said, it helped you at a period. If skipping breakfast helps you naturally eat less without feeling deprived, great. That's real too. But that's a very different claim than fasting activates fat burning mode. And that's why you should set a timer. And a lot of times it has deleterious effects, which causes people to overeat later. Like many of my clients, when they first start with me, they're like, "Oh, I don't eat breakfast," and then they don't eat lunch until 1 PM, but then they're like, "I don't know why I'm binging after work." I'm like, "I do.
I sure
Yeah,
do.
makes
Call
perfect
on me,
sense to
call on
me."
me. Ask me, ask me.
What did you tell me or message me the other day? Like, this did they write this play about me?
Is this fucking play about us? And if you don't know what that's from, it's from Euphoria, and Euphoria's season is coming out soon.
I think it's already out.
Okay, it's already out. Yes. And here is where it applies for this audience specifically. The research on intermittent fasting in women of reproductive age is very thin, like almost non existent. So, most of the foundational intermittent fasting studies were done in either men or postmenopausal women. So, female physiology is different because reproductive hormones are different. And extending fasting windows can actually suppress your LH and FSH, which are both hormones that drive ovulation. So there are case reports of women literally losing their periods on aggressive intermittent fasting protocols.
Yep. And the reason for that is because you probably enter a low energy availability state and you don't have enough nutrients for your body to do its job. So, what should someone who genuinely likes eating in a window do with this information? Because we don't want to make people feel like they have to abandon something that feels like it works for them.
Yeah. So there's, again, a lot of nuance to this. But if you don't naturally feel hungry in the morning, you eat in a window and you feel good and your train doesn't suffer and your cycle is regular, fine. You can listen to your body. But if you are forcing a fast and white knuckling through hunger and training fasted and seeing your performance tank and tank and tank and you're exhausted, that's your body telling you something. And I will say, most women don't realize, like, why are you not hungry in the morning? Have you ever wondered, like, why aren't you hungry in the morning? It's because another hormone called cortisol is suppressing your appetite. And for those of us who run really fast lives or really, really busy and run on cortisol, we are not hungry in the morning. That's not a badge of honor that you're not hungry in the morning. It's actually your body asking you to listen to it, but it's
A lot
waking
of
up late.
it is also adaptive. It's habitual. It's action based, meaning if you consistently don't eat breakfast, you consistently skip breakfast, your body will regulate to match the behavior. And also, if you start eating breakfast, you will notice that you get hungrier, your performance improves, you start seeing the scale move in a way that you want to, you train better, everything.
Honestly, intermittent fasting is on the cover of the burn book for me when it comes to women. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna say that.
Agreed. Yeah.
Even more
Yeah.
than blood types.
Yeah. So if you're in a calorie deficit and you're trying to build muscle, but you're also skipping breakfast, we want you to think about what you're giving your body and what it needs to do. And
Next up is the keto diet, aka the ketogenic diet. And probably still the most talked about, but it is essentially what it is ultra high fat, like 60% of your calories coming from fat, very low carb, like less than 10% of your calories coming from carbs, and then moderate-ish protein, which also is a little has to be a little bit on the lower side most times. So the goal is to shift your body into what's called ketosis. And this is where we actually use fat instead of glucose.
it actually takes it's really hard to get your body into ketosis. Like if you truly wanted to be good at this diet, you would have to measure your blood all the time. Because if your protein is too high, guess what your body's going to do? Make that into glucose.
Yep,
It's not just going to say, oh, protein equals muscle. It's going to say, no, we're not getting carbs. We need glucose. Let's use the first thing available. So
yep,
you could be doing this diet wrong. Anyway,
yeah.
it is interesting because it has a legitimate clinical origin story on anything in the list. It was originally developed in the 1920s as a treatment for drug resistant epilepsy in children.
Mhm.
So it can work for that in a clinical setting. That's the key word. The brain responds to ketones differently, like you said, than glucose, and it reduces seizure frequency, which, kind of makes it similar to medicine.
And when you compare keto to other dietary approaches that match for calories and protein, the fat loss advantage largely disappears. You lose weight faster early on because you're dropping that glycogen and water from the carbs. But same thing we talked about with low carb. Long term adherence is the variable that matters. And so, more than the macronutrient ratio, it's really just keto's super hard to stick to. We know that calories in, calories out is really what moves the needle for body composition change. So why do a diet that's, like, so painfully hard to do and, like, really hard to get into?
Right, right. Like that social restriction alone would be enough for me to be like, nope, not my business. Like you can't eat at restaurants, you can't eat at most people's houses. Like what? You're gonna ask them, oh, only eat butter and meat and cheese and that's it.
Chicharrones.
Yeah, give me some chicharrones. No alcohol for me. You can't have birthday
Also
cake. No sweet treats. For some people, that might be worth it if you can stick with it, but that's the keyword, right? Like, can you stick with it for longer than a week, 2
no,
weeks,
you
3 weeks?
can't. No, you can't, because when
Yeah.
10% of your calories come from carbs, you don't get to have dark chocolate, which is,
Yeah.
like,
And I
literally
think,
the only thing.
yeah. And I think for a lot of women, it's a lot of this cycle on, cycle off, the yo yo dieting where it feels like failure. And then they get back on Monday, and then the weekend hits, and then you get back on Monday. And it's this constant, unstable process that keeps you stuck.
Yeah, I was guided to do keto for literally a year and a half, and I never got into ketosis for longer than 2 days at a time. A year and a half. I really tried
Yeah.
to make it work. And for people and well, I'll speak to our women here. And for women who are training glycolytic work, which means like anything moderate to high intensity, your body is using glucose primarily for that performance. So sprints, circuits, heavy lifts, your body wants to use carbohydrates for that because they're quick digesting and quickly utilized. So you can adapt to using ketones for lower intensity aerobic work, but the ceiling on your performance in a glycolytic context is genuinely lower without carbs. So if your goal is to build strength and muscle, keto is literally working against that exact goal.
Do you know when your body uses fat as a fuel source?
For steady state zone 2 work, baby,
Walking.
walking.
Yep. So it's not your hit class, it's not F45, it's not your cardio, it's not even your gym session. It's walking. which is why we say get those steps in, babe.
Yep. And if it's not 10K, make it 8K. And if it ain't 8K, just do your best. Shoot for the moon, land amongst the stars.
What's so crazy to me is like all the keto branded bullshit. Like I was at Costco one day and I saw keto bread. Like my eyes can't roll harder in the back of my head. Like just because you say it's keto and you're saying, oh, net carbs, you're still eating carbs. Just because it has fiber, you can't just subtract the carbs.
Exactly.
It's just like, it's this health food, quote unquote, health food with a good marketing team.
When they were like, we're going to bacon wrap cheese and call it keto and be like, this is a diet. The whole
Listen,
Midwest
I
was
want
like,
that.
we're going to try keto. We think keto's really, really smart. We think we should do that. It's like,
have you ever had a bacon wrapped date filled with like feta cheese or goat cheese? Like, yeah, I want that. Is it keto? Yeah. Am I eating it because it's keto? No, I'm eating it because it's delicious.
No, a date is simply not keto. That's your entire carbs for the whole day.
True. Good point.
Okay, so let's get into it. The keto-friendly food market, like the multi-billion-dollar industry built on the idea that you have to stay under 20 grams of net carbs and no one even knows what a net carb is and that the fact that it's actually fiber, whatever. The quality of everything else goes down. It does matter. Ultra-processed food wrapped in keto branding and wrapped in bacon and cheese is still ultra-processed food.
Right. So moving into our next segment.
Yeah, we're just going to the other end of the pendulum now.
We're going to swing to the opposite end of the spectrum and talk about veganism. So vegan diets are no animal products, no meat, no dairy, no eggs, no fish. These are motivated by ethics, the environment, some health concerns, and some combination of all three.
Some vegans don't even eat honey because it's made from bees. I want to say up front that the ethical and environmental case for veganism is legitimate, and we are not here to argue that at all. This is a health and performance conversation specifically, and a vegan diet can absolutely be healthy in a long-term diet. The word in this sentence is worth talking about. It's the can. It can in a long-term diet. Plant-centric dietary patterns like vegan, vegetarian, they take a lot of planning and honestly a lot of research to get them right. And they usually have the best health outcomes related to our queen, fiber, and also phytonutrients, but specifically fiber.
So let's talk a little bit about what it takes to actually be vegan if you were to do this diet. So, for one, B12 is non negotiable. It does not exist in plant foods in a bioavailable form, full stop. So, if you're vegan and you're not supplementing with B12, you will eventually become deficient. And B12 deficiency causes neurological damage that can be irreversible. Not to scare you, that's just what happens. And there's many solutions that you can do for it. But this is why we say it requires some planning. So in this instance, a supplement is actually necessary.
And beyond that, iron and zinc from plant sources have a lower bioavailability than animal sources. And that doesn't mean you can't get enough. It just means you need more of them and you need to prioritize them. For example, omega-3s, you can get ALA from flax seeds, walnuts, hemp seeds, but the conversion from EPA to DHA is inefficient. So an algae-based omega-3 supplement is kind of worth considering. Vitamin D, calcium, these need attention too.
Yeah, this is where it could be helpful to have a multivitamin. But let's talk about protein because this is where people who are doing vegan dietary patterns might struggle if you're also lifting. So, leucine is actually the amino acid that is directly responsible for triggering muscle protein synthesis or how you build muscle. Animal proteins are leucine dense. So, plant proteins generally have lower leucine content and lower overall digestibility. So, something called DIAAS, digestible indispensable amino acid score. To get the same muscle building stimulus from a plant protein that you would whey or eggs, you would need more total protein. So the commonly cited number, like we say for standard diets, is 1 gram per pound of body weight. The common cited for a vegan diet is going to be 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight.
And truthfully, on a vegan diet, you probably want to be at the higher end of that range, which is doable. It just requires a little bit of intention. And it's not, I cannot stress this enough, accomplished by a salad with some chickpeas on it. Like, you have to prioritize things like tempeh, seitan, edamame, tofu. Like these things are all have to be prepped and cooked. And just like meat does, it takes actually a lot of work.
Yeah.
But also consider things like Oreos are marketed to be vegan. Sour Patch Kids, Swedish Fish are vegan. So a diet can be entirely vegan and entirely made up of ultra processed garbage. So the label doesn't equal health. And we actually know this from, remember the Game Changers Netflix documentary?
Mhm.
And anyone listening to this on Netflix, there was a documentary that came out that was like promoting veganism, and it had these kids. I remember the specific study. These like younger athletes went through labs and they had them eat vegetarian or vegan for like 6 weeks, and they ended up seeing all their labs get better. But what's crazy about it is that these kids were eating like fast food and junk food before. So it made it
Right.
painted it out to be like, "Oh, vegan is the answer." And literally my inbox was flooded with, well, not all of my clients, 'cause a lot of my clients are smart, but they were flooded with like questions about like, "Oh, should I go vegan? I heard it's going to make my blood better. I'm scared of all-cause mortality." I'm like, "Dude, eat your protein and keep
Yeah.
walking." Like, no, we're gonna keep eating the
Yeah.
protein.
We can be mindful of the environment and reduce consumption, sure, and maybe opt for a little more tofu or tempeh in your diet. You can do that while also still eating lean proteins every once in a while to meet your goal.
And you can also prioritize the quality of the meat you're getting. If you are in a place where you can buy from a local farm or a farmer's market, or
Yeah.
if you're able to, order from things like Thrive Market, help the environment. Okay. So
Yeah.
there are options.
This one is a little broad, but this is going to be clean eating. And we want to use this segment to zoom out because clean eating is less of a specific diet and more of this like cultural war that some of these diets swim in.
And the word clean eating, clean, is doing so much work in the wellness culture. And I don't think most people have stopped to really interrogate it. Like, clean implies dirty or good versus bad. And when you apply that to a food, you're not just describing it a macronutrient, you're attaching a moral value to the act of eating.
Yeah. And this is where it gets so overwhelming and leaves people feeling paralyzed with making healthy food choices. And depending on what influencer you listen to, they might have a slightly different list of what's clean and what's good and what's bad. Similar to this discussion we were having with some lady on Instagram about oven roasted turkey breast deli meat being bad for you. It's like bad in what context? That doesn't even
Yeah.
make sense.
And a lot of people experience this kind of obsessive preoccupation with eating correctly or the right way or pure and clean. And it presents with restriction. Ultimately, it presents restriction and significant anxiety around food choices, social isolation because eating with other people becomes stressful. Sometimes pulling yourself out of social events because you don't want to be seen or having to be making special modifications to your meals. And overall, a sense of moral superiority or self worth tied to dietary purity or impurity.
Yes. Yeah. And we want to be really honest about this. Wellness culture, fitness culture, our culture, we have created this environment where this obsession can hide in plain sight because these behaviors look admirable, right? Like this woman who was saying, "Oh, well, I avoid those foods because they're a group 1 carcinogen." And therefore you're being disciplined by limiting these, but you're also still drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes. So it's not disciplined. You're not just taking care of yourself. You're not doing research because that's not what research is, and just using fear mongering tactics. The line between health conscious and disordered is not always obvious. And clean eating, quote unquote, culture blurs that line deliberately.
Let's talk about the Dirty Dozen specifically, because I think this is a perfect example of how fear based wellness messaging causes real harm. So, the Dirty Dozen is an annual list published by the Environmental Working Group, or known as EWG, ranking conventionally grown produce by pesticide residue levels. So, things like spinach, strawberries, kale, peaches usually are at the top. And the implication is that you should avoid these foods or only buy organic. Like, Oh, only buy organic for these.
My skin turns so red when I hear people say this. And the big issue is that the EWG measures the presence of whether a residue is detectable. They do not evaluate whether those residues levels are at a dose that actually poses a health risk. And the FDA and the EPA set maximum residue limits based on toxicology reports that they have over years and years and years and years. What level of exposure is actually harmful? The overwhelming majority of the Dirty Dozen produce is well within those safety thresholds. So, toxicologists have consistently criticized the EWG's methodology for conflating detection with danger. Those are not the same things. It's like we always say, dose makes the poison, right?
Exactly. So the practical effect of this list is that people, often people with limited grocery budgets, avoid things like strawberries and spinach, genuinely nutritious, affordable foods. They're just told that these foods are like dirty. And honestly, by a nonprofit with a marketing budget and a methodology that actually toxicologists push back on.
Yeah. Yeah. Organic produce is fine if you want it and you can afford it. It's not meaningfully safer from a pesticide risk standpoint for most people in most contexts. And honestly, a lot of times the organic foods have to be sprayed more with quote unquote organic pesticides and deterrents than your standard conventional produce. So you're probably getting a little bit more even with organic produce.
So either
But
way, wash your produce. Okay, wash your produce, give it a little rinse. Yes, we are exposed to environmental toxins and our agricultural system leaves a lot to be desired. So I definitely want everyone to wash their fruit, but I don't think that you should be avoiding the dirty dozen. And sure, things with rinds, no, you don't need to wash it, but you also don't need to spend an arm and a leg to buy it organic. So
So you don't need to be afraid of vegetables. So we know we went through a lot today and we want to land on something because there is a through line through every single one of these diets and we don't want it to get lost. Every diet that we talked about today works in short term if it puts you into a calorie deficit. That's it. That's the mechanism. The blood type diet, keto, carnivore, intermittent fasting, when they produce weight loss, it's because the person is eating less and probably better quality. The magic isn't in the framework, it's in the calorie math.
and every single one of them, without exception, gets sold as something more than it is: a system, a lifestyle, as an identity, because systems and lifestyles and identities are more valuable than eat less processed foods and have more protein, because you can't put a logo on that.
So give us the quick, unsexy, rapid fire version of what we need to take away.
Okay, number one, adequate protein. Probably higher than most people eat, especially women. Mostly whole, minimally processed foods. Enough fiber, which is about 20 to 35 grams for women around this age. Enough calories to support your activity level, or TDEE, and your hormonal health. A sustainable pattern you can maintain without white knuckling it, like keto. Adequate sleep, appropriate stress management, or at least tangible stress management practices. And those last two affect your hunger hormones, your insulin sensitivity, and your body composition more than any other dietary tweak you can make. And I'm going to say that again. Sleep and stress management, those two are the ones that definitely have the biggest impact on your body composition more than any other dietary tweak you can make.
Yeah, nobody's getting rich off saying eat enough protein and sleep 8 hours, which is probably why it doesn't go viral. But we'll add one thing, that your relationship to food matters throughout all of this. Not as a soft, feel good afterthought, as a measurable clinical value, because how you feel about food and your eating pattern will determine your sustainability to a healthy, well balanced, sustainable practice. So if you're constantly in this food guilt, restrict and binge cycle, that mental overhead and tracking every single point and every single macro and whether your strawberries are organic, that is doing a big psychological burden, which makes everything else suffer. Your sleep, your training, all of it.
Strong, fed, and not spiraling about spinach. That's the goal. And that's always actually been the goal. And if you're on one of these diets right now and it's not working for you, we got you. And if you're on one of these diets and it is working for you, cool. The question is to ask yourself, is it working because of the specific rules, or is it working because those rules actually helped you just eat more whole foods and less garbage? Because it's probably the second one. And you don't need the rules. You can keep the outcome and drop the framework and enjoy a little sweet treat every day.
Exactly. And as always, share this with a friend who's trapped in the diet culture hamster wheel. Connect with us on Instagram at overt_thinking podcast, at Brianna Lamb, and at Kelsie Michelle. And we will see you in the next episode.